of nowhere, this person reaches their hand through the gate and grabs my arm and is like, Theresa, we're here for you. And I just burst into tears. Like, it's like I'm supposed to be running this huge event.
Yeah.
And I'm like, I don't know what to do right now.
Yeah.
And I burst into tears, and it was like, just like the care of that moment of someone being like, okay, I hear how stressed out people are and how like, and I hear their complaints. I hear but I want you to know that we're here for you. And there was something in that moment that like broke me, but also like shifted something where it was like, all right, we could reset. We just changed our game plan to get people in as fast as we could. Got everyone, like, got the gates moving, got the fire marshal off our back. Yeah. And then it was like, all right, it's almost 7 a.m. and I'm going to restart my day. Yeah. That's what I'm going to do. I'm going to go to the bathroom and I'm going to take 10 minutes and I'm going to put on some makeup and we're going to pretend like this is the new start of the day.
Well, welcome back to the show. Today, I'm with my really good friend, Theresa Babbitt, and we are going to talk about so many different things. It'll be fun, but I want to introduce her a little bit. First of all, she's an event producer, communicator, and she specializes in nonprofits. She's worked with youth and young adults and international missions team. She's currently the director of communications at an online university, and she and I actually met when she was the director of operations at Azusa Now, which was a huge 70,000 person event in the stadium in, LA?
The Coliseum.
LA Coliseum. I never know where it was, but a huge stadium event. So I'm super excited to chat with her. Welcome to the show, Theresa.
Thank you.
I remember when we met for that event, I was like, what am I doing out here? And you were like so gracious and welcomed me with open arms. But that was like such a crazy event now looking back. What year did that take place? I don't remember.
2016.
Okay. So I just remember I had just got back from YWAM. I was just praying a lot and felt like God kept showing me stadiums. Like anytime I was praying, I kept seeing like stadiums in my mind. And I'm like, this is kind of weird. Why do I keep seeing stadiums? And then I saw, I think I saw online like an ad for Azusa Now. And if you don't know what Azusa Now is, it was basically a big prayer revival rally, right? I don't know. How would you describe it?
I would say it's a prayer and worship gathering put on by The Call. And they had done several prayer and worship events over the last, starting in 2000. And Azusa Now was a very like line in the sand event for the organization because they added a healing and an evangelism component to it.
It was so cool.
Yeah.
It was just an amazing event, 70,000 people in LA's Coliseum. I mean, it was a crazy day.
It was a crazy day. And you took on the craziest part. I was talking to someone yesterday and I was like, Sara showed up and it was pouring rain in LA. And she said, what can I do? And I was like, well, you can go to Home Depot and get a pump for this water. And I need some tampons. And I just told all of you. Basically, Sara did a very personal errand for me when she was a stranger. And I'm also really grateful.
It was wild. I mean, because you, like, when I showed up there, I was like, I just feel like I'm supposed to help. And you were like, great. Can you do like this? And I feel like one of the things was the day before it was raining so hard. And I remember we had to go and get, like, I was at Target, like putting towels, like hundreds of towels, like beach towels into a cart to just go and try and cover the equipment. And so it was just wild. I'm curious, like, what did you learn about yourself in running that event? Because it was a challenging event for me and I have an events background, but you were like the mayor. You were running the entire thing. It was a huge team that helped too, but like you were the center point of like the wheel. So what did you learn about just challenging yourself too?
Yeah, I mean, thankfully the CEO of The Call, Rachel Holden, had a lot more experience in large stadium gatherings than I did. So she was the queen bee, if you will. But I think really what I learned was, because I did a lot of managing of people during that time. And I learned one big takeaway was, it's like Jesus is king, but kindness is not far behind. Yeah. And like, so it's like, it's like when you are in an environment where there's so much stress. Yeah. And it's supposed to be an event where people, and thankfully, like it was an event where so many people encountered God in a significant way. Mm-hmm. It's like they'll, like seeing the back end of all of that and being involved in it, I really learned a lot about stress management, not just as an individual, but as a team.
Yeah.
And so, thankfully, like Rachel really led in a way where it was like, we're going to work really hard and we're going to have a lot of fun.
Yeah.
So we would take random breaks as a team and do something really ridiculous and really fun together at some of our most stressful times. and just kind of really, really tried to remember like that every 5-second prayer counts. Like if you're overwhelmed, take a minute. Like,
that's
it's going to be
good
way
advice.
better to like pause for a second, like compose yourself than to create like a domino effect of
stress
because you are overwhelmed. Right. So it was a really interesting opportunity to watch something come to life and to learn how to like manage myself and manage a team through that. Literally at 7 a.m, I had been there since 4 a.m.
Oh my gosh.
We arrived at 4 a.m. and there were already thousands of people at the gate. And our plan to get people inside the stadium was completely demolished by the crowd. And it was like,
I remember because I was on the doors.
yeah, you like Sara picked the most stressful part of the day and was like, I've got this, and like stayed there all day. I don't think you saw a single part of the event.
I didn't. I was at the doors all day. And it was funny because like I talked to people, and I want to hear more about what you're saying, but I talked to people who were in the event, and they like, actually my husband Stefan was at the event. Like we didn't know each other then, but he was there with his family, and some of his like family friends were there as well. And so they were all like, it was such an amazing event. And like, I'm like, I don't know. I was there to run the doors. Like, and like, that was why God sent me to that event. But yeah, go back to, so the doors.
Oh yeah. So these like the gates, right? So we have this, I showed up at the gate that was supposed to be our volunteers, right? So they're all waiting. But by the time I got there was so many people that, and we had, one of our staff members, love him. He was still running a forklift inside the stadium. So we couldn't let anybody in until that was done.
Yeah.
Then we had like some agreement with the Coliseum where everyone had to have a paper ticket. So we had to figure out how to pass out paper tickets and then let them get scanned. Anyway, but by the time we were kind of getting ourselves together to let people in, the fire marshal had showed up and they were like, we're going to shut you down because there's people in the streets. Like, but we weren't allowed to let people in, so it was like we had this moment.
It was stressful.
Oh yeah. At like 5:30 in the morning where I've only slept an hour and a half the night before. And I'm sitting there and literally I'm at the volunteer gate. So people that I know who have signed up to volunteer, who are part of like churches and organizations near me are standing outside the gate.
Like,
and I hear them going, Theresa, I have to use the bathroom. And I'm like, I can't do anything to help them.
I can't help you. Yeah.
Yeah. And out of nowhere, this person reaches their hand through the gate and grabs my arm and is like, Theresa, we're here for you. And I just burst into tears. Like, it's like I'm supposed to be running this huge event.
Yeah.
And I'm like, I don't know what to do right now.
Yeah.
And I burst into tears and it was like, just like the care of that moment of someone being like, okay, I hear how stressed out people are and how like, and I hear their complaints, but I want you to know that we're here for you. And there was something in that moment that like broke me, but also like shifted something where it was like, all right, we could reset. We just changed our game plan to get people in as fast as we could. Got everyone, like, got the gates moving, got the fire marshal off our back. Yeah. And then it was like, all right, it's almost 7 a.m. and I'm going to restart my day.
Yeah.
That's what I'm going to do. I'm going to go to the bathroom and I'm going to take 10 minutes and I'm going to put on some makeup and we're going to pretend like this is the new start of the day.
I just got here. That's so good. I actually think that's a really practical tip for anyone who's in a high stress job or high stakes event, or like maybe you're an event planner or you're, doing a big presentation, or maybe you have to go and do a big pitch for your company. And it's like sometimes just composing yourself. Like I remember when I spoke at the Colorado State Assembly, and that was 8,000 people.
Wow.
And I slept like 1 hour the night before because I was not only going to be on stage presenting this campaign we were running, but I was also in the back in the green room, like headphones on, producing the whole show.
Oh my goodness.
So everything that was on a screen, every person on a stage, and like those program line by lines, like they're like 6:55 this person, 6:57 this person, and they're to the wire. And I was like, the night before I couldn't sleep. I was in a hotel. I was stressing to level 1000. And then I had to sit there backstage and, Senator so-and-so is running late and I'm shuffling the board. And then it's like, okay, Sarah, now you've got to go change into like a whole professional, like, cause I'm backstage in my jeans. I got to go change in a whole professional outfit, get on stage and talk to 8,000 people. And I'm trying to maintain, my composure.
Yeah.
And so I think like, that's such a good tip that I think if I had just gone to the bathroom and like, okay, let's reorient, let's reset. Because I think that's something I learned too late. And I really feel like it would have helped me not just internalize the stress and just be like, like living on adrenaline in certain high stakes parts of my career or like events I did. And, one of the things that you're talking about is your team and the kindness. And I think that was one thing I actually learned at Azusa Now was, I know you didn't ask me this question, but one thing I learned about myself was like, you can be doing something at a very high level and still maintain kindness and maintain grace with people, because I had come from a culture, the political event culture is there's no grace. There's why the F didn't you get this door open? That's the attitude.
Unfortunately, sometimes even in the Christian culture.
Yeah. And so it was like kind of like, that I don't remember the guy I was working with on the door. I remember he had a ponytail, but
Julian.
Yeah. He was so gracious with the stadium staff. And I was like, these people need to get these doors open. Like I was about to yell at somebody, and he was just like, I know you're doing your best. Is there any way you can push a little harder for us? We really need to get in it. He was just the way he was saying the same thing, the same level of urgency, but the way he was saying it was getting that door guy on our team, not bossing him around and saying, get this door open, Right. And I'd come from a culture where it was bossy, is get this door open or you're fired kind of thing, or I'm going to report you to somebody or da-da-da-da. And I think that one thing I loved about your guys' team was that kindness did radiate down. And I do think, as believers, like we are stewarding the culture that we're, like you're trying to host a prayer and worship event and it was really stressful there for a couple hours.
Oh yeah.
Because we had, however many thousands of people out in the streets in LA. There's not space for that.
Right.
So I think that's a good point. So now you get back in, you've composed yourself. How does the day go for you after that?
A lot smoother than I expected, honestly.
Yeah.
We had a few like kind of stressful moments, and I honestly for that event I primarily was working on the logistics, all of the backup house, which is like volunteers, offering, anything that was happening that wasn't directly on the stage, and then other people on my team were over like
which I think
stage
that's
management.
hard. Like that's a harder job sometimes.
They're just very different. Right?
Yeah,
they're very different roles, and so I ended up like in a little press box with my walkie-talkie and utilizing a couple wonderful friends who were running around for me.
Yeah.
And it ended up being a really great, smooth day. And if you've ever worked with at an event like that, they don't go how you plan. And you kind of have to like, you just
ride the wave.
You have the schedule, but it's more of like a suggestion than a guideline sometimes.
Yeah.
And almost every event I did with that organization, it was like things are going well, and then suddenly you realize you are almost out of time. You have to slam everything else into the last couple hours.
Yeah.
But it still felt so smooth, and honestly, even years later now, I run into people sometimes, and if I find out they were at Azusa Now, I'm just like, okay, can you tell me what your experience was like?
Yeah.
And I can't tell you how many times I've just been in tears listening to people's experiences and just like struck by the kindness of Jesus. Like, and so it was really, I think that those gathering times where we come together and we encounter God together, like it is so much work. It is so stressful, but so worth it, right?
Well, and it's like being able to facilitate that is special in its own way.
Right.
I'm curious about like just events in general. How did you kind of get into events?
Azusa Now.
Okay.
I mean,
if you survive a 70,000 person stadium event, then it's like you could probably do any kind of event.
That's how I got into events.
Okay.
It was really I was a little intercessory missionary at the International House of Prayer in Kansas City, and moved out to California with The Call, which is the organization that did Azusa Now, and was working with youth and young adults, leading missions, like short-term missions trips and all that kind of stuff, and doing discipleship schools, and just basically got tapped. And they were like, hey, we need a director of ops for this event. Don't worry. I know you think it's out of your wheelhouse, but I'll help you, kind of thing. And I was like, okay, sure. I mean, like, if that's what is needed right now, you know, like basically serve where you're asked.
Yeah.
And and then once you go through an experience like that, people are suddenly like, oh, can you plan my wedding?
Yeah.
Or can you do my small conference? Or can you
do my
we have a
corporate
team
event
building?
or-
Corporate event. And it's like, I think I can do it.
Yeah.
Like, you know?
I think I can handle that. I think
Because a lot of the elements are the same. It's just when you have a stadium gathering, you've just scaled it up so high.
Yeah.
So, So that's how I got into it.
Okay, that makes sense. Yeah, it was a little bit of a trial by fire.
For sure. And it's been really fun. And I really, COVID changed everything for sure. But for a long time, it was like, I loved like coming alongside people and facilitating spaces where their dreams could come alive.
Yeah.
It's like you have this vision or you want to have an event, and nobody has an event like, I mean, even if it's just a party, you're not just doing it flippantly. It's like there's a reason
There's
for
an intention
it, right?
behind it.
Yeah. It's like I want to have fun, or I want to, or I'm getting married, or I really need a team building activity for like, because I want some relational equity built between our colleagues. Like there is an actual like time and space for each event. And I think that part's really beautiful. Like you're taking a moment in time and you're going to kind of putting boundaries around it. And you're saying, okay, this specific moment in time, this is how we've come together. And this is what either we're celebrating or what we are, noting. A lot of times there's opportunities for a line in the sand type moment for people, and or a God encounter, and it's just so it's a special.
So you started though after all working these events, you started your own events business, and then COVID hits. So talk about that pivot.
So I honestly. After Azusa Now, I started kind of doing ad hoc events for a bunch of different people. Yeah. And in the middle of that, the organization I had been working for, it was kind of a perfect storm. Like Azusa Now happened. Yeah. Then the call moved to Colorado Springs. Yeah. And I was like, I'm a California girl. Yeah. All my family's here. I'm going to stay. And then I was like, well, who am I now? Yeah. So I started this process of being like, okay, Jesus, this is my experience. This is my skill set. This is the passions you've put in my heart. And these are the places that I love, and kind of looking for the intersections of those things. And I began to like imagine, well, what would it be like to run a business and to walk alongside people a lot of times through really stressful things. Like weddings are beautiful and wonderful, but stressful. Oh yeah. And so like, I can't tell you how many times I sat with couples and I was like, I'm your event planner, but I'm kind of doing premarital counseling.
I'm kind of your therapist too.
I'm kind of your therapist right now. Or so I just realized that was actually a very sacred role at times, like to be able to walk that closely with someone in such a transitional season, right? Yeah. So that is more like particularly with weddings, but I just began to see like that there could be a lot of influence and purpose in that space, and was still kind of like, I don't know, do I want to do the full on like DBA, do the business thing? It's such a switch. Yeah. I
come from the missions background. Like,
when I graduated with a Bible degree, I was like, I'm going to,
start a business? What?
Yeah. Exactly. Like, what? And so, it was kind of settling into it and was like, no, I see like that God could really use this. And it's not what I was thinking. Yeah. But I feel like the same reasons I would be working with a discipleship school could transfer and apply to a business.
Yeah, absolutely.
The same like core values could be there. And had a bunch of events contracts, and then was working with one organization, had like 3 different contracts with them for different events and operations things. And then California changed all of their contracting laws, and it became like their HR department was like, we've given you enough, like we're billing you enough hours that we have to offer you a full-time job kind of thing. And they offered me the communications role that I have now. Yeah. And at first I was like, I don't want to. Like, I'm like really.
I'm a free bird. I have my own business now.
I'm a free bird. I finally built the website. Like, this is going to happen. Yeah. And I was like, I think I should take it. Yeah. And then a month later, COVID happened. Yeah. And the 5 event contracts I had were all canceled in 1 week. And I was just like, one of those moments
It's
where
like
I'm like,
God
okay,
timing right there.
yeah, okay, Jesus, you see me.
Yeah.
And I still do events from time to time. And I still have the website, and I still
And maybe
have my
one day
business.
it'll be fully,
And
back
I've
up
done definitely like run several online events
Yeah.
now as a communications director.
Yeah.
But it's just like God's timing is really funny. It's
Yeah.
really interesting. But I just looking back, I wish I would have told myself, you asked this question later, like what would I tell my 18-year-old self? But
Yeah.
if I look back on the 18-year-old self who was like, I'm going to be a fiery preacher person. And
Yeah.
I think I would tell her like, hey, you know what? Being faithful to show up where you have favor is actually what produces impact.
Ooh, I
it's
love
not your
that.
position or your platform. And so I think in a season, especially in the church and in culture, where we're kind of like to steal someone else's phrase, like in a season where we're like post everything,
Yeah.
like post Christian,
Postmodern. Yeah.
post Facebook, even almost
Yeah.
like depending on what
Yeah.
generation you are. It's like in the season where we're kind of post everything.
Yeah.
Everything needs to be reimagined. And even like our idea of what it is to follow Jesus and, or be in ministry, quote unquote. And so
That's interesting.
Yeah.
So when you were 18, did you think you were going to be like a platform preacher, or like what did you think you were going to do?
I don't know if I would have said I would be a platform preacher, but I
was
definitely,
that even a thing? There was like no
No.
social media.
it wasn't a thing, not the way it is now. Right.
Yeah.
And I got a really pretty quickly was like, oh, I wouldn't want to do that.
Yeah.
But I think for me, I was more like, okay, I really feel called to the church and feel called to disciple people. And like, I thought teaching would be a
Vocational
part of that.
ministry
Yeah,
kinda.
more vocational ministry.
Yeah.
Right. And like then I entered like the parachurch world.
Yeah.
And the longer I was in that, the more I realized like, oh, like the church is so rapidly changing
Yeah.
that if you really want, like, if your desire is to really love people and to be in and to have influence and impact, the church might not be the place you actually want to be.
And that's really interesting
You know?
you say that, because I think a lot of young people right now, and then I'm kind of talking to like if you're under 25, like the church landscape looks completely different because of social media, because of the way technology has changed. You can actually make a career out of being a preacher now, like in the U.S. Now, this isn't
so
in every
weird, right?
country, but if you can, get speaking gigs and book deals and sell courses, and you can have a very nice income, and it does complicate how people's callings are kind of being assessed, because it's like, well, God, if you're calling me to ministry, does that mean I have to have an Instagram with 20, million people following me? Or does it mean that I'm called to be an accountant? Or does it mean that it's actually kind of all of it? It's like you can be called to be a pastor, teach from, a stage every Sunday, or you can be called to parachurch like you were, or you can be called into being a journalist. Like the church is everywhere. And I think COVID kind of challenged some of those structures of like the church is this building. Like it's not. It's the church is the people of God equipped and out in every sphere of influence, in my opinion.
For sure. I agree with you.
So, I mean, I'm curious, like, you're obviously have leadership, like a gift of leadership on your life. Like, I know this about you as your friend, but have you always thought of yourself as a leader? Like, when you're that 18-year-old, do you think I'm a leader, or when did you kind of realize, or do you think you're a leader?
Yeah, no, those are great questions. Can I make one more comment?
Yeah.
And then go there?
Yeah.
Because I think one thing that was interesting to me about having spent a season doing stadium events is I got to this point, and I think 100% I would not change a thing. Like, I think stadium gatherings are really impactful. And I know so many people who either gave their life to Jesus at a Billy Graham crusade or at
had an encounter with God.
Encounter or at a passion conference or at whatever, and had an encounter with God at a call event. But I think I began asking myself the question of like, what does it mean to move from a stadium to a kitchen table?
Yeah.
And like having those real conversations with people.
Yeah.
And I think just as you were talking about, like that the church is everywhere.
Yeah.
It's like it is everywhere. And why do we limit God to one space or another?
Yeah.
Right. And so
why does it have to be these mega gatherings versus your neighbor at your kitchen table?
right. And who and your neighbor at your kitchen table that person might not come into your stadium gathering.
Yeah.
But they might come into your home, right?
Well,
so I've been
yeah.
really challenged by that lately. Anyway.
No, I think I do want to go down that road a little bit because I do think that there's this level of like impact that you can have. Like you look at Jesus' impact, it's the 12. The 12 changed the world.
Yeah.
He did impact the crowds, but those crowds weren't doing life with him. They weren't eating, breaking bread, hiking through these long walks he had to go on between cities. Like they weren't sleeping on the mat next to like the people who were closest to him were the ones that were so profoundly changed and went on to plant the church and to really export Christianity around the world. And it's still here now millennia later. Right. So it's like I do think about the exponential impact that small discipleship, like one-to-one discipleship. Right. I mean, like 12 people can change the world. Like if you're discipling like 3 people, like what can that do? And I think you and I are both like we love a conference. We love an event. Yeah. Like I'm a 7. I'm like, yes, party. Like there's people on a stage, like Enneagram 7, like, yeah, like, but sometimes I do wonder if these are just massive pep rallies for Christians.
Sometimes,
you know, and sometimes Christians need some pep rallies. Like I need encouragement. Yeah. Like I need to be with people who love the Lord. But I do think there is a level of like, as we're thinking about the future, like what does it look like to do both well? Like, how do we do these gatherings really well? But also like, how do we equip people so that it doesn't just stay at this like mountaintop experience at a rally and then they go home into their neighborhoods, into their offices, into their schools. And it's like, okay, but now what do I do?
Yeah, I've heard it talked a lot about, I've heard it put this way, like King David went in and out of the house of God and to the battlefield. Like he went back and forth. His life was both like seasons of being in the house and in the presence and out.
I love that.
Like, I think it's like there is something to be said for like even just acknowledging that is a rhythm of life that we don't all know how to do well, but we need to learn how to do it, right?
Right, because like you're in a context working for a nonprofit right now, but like you're a ministry girl at heart. Like you've been heavily in ministry, so you've been in and out of both fields. Okay, so back to the leadership question.
Okay, yeah, here we go.
Okay, so what is your answer? I guess
sometimes I feel like a leader. Yeah. Sometimes I'm like, I don't know. I have one person on my little communications team right now. Is that leading? I don't know if that's leading anyone. Yeah. But I think what I've learned, and people have told me, I'm a firstborn too, so some of this might be like...
And you're an Enneagram 1.
And I'm an Enneagram 1. And so like there are some things that kind of lead to like, oh, she's got like leadership like tendencies. You know? And so, but I think we all make choices, right? And I have always felt like... I think it's interesting, I think particularly having a ministry background, being a female in ministry. Yeah. And having like some leadership tendencies, right? Having a bent toward that. Yeah. But also knowing like, so it's like for me, I am really like I can take charge when I need to, but I'm happy to follow, right? When I'm like around a good leader that I respect, I'm like, I will walk off a cliff with you. That's fine. Yeah. Like it's not like blind sheep, right? And so, but at the same time, I think
there's very few leaders though, and I think this is a point before you go on. There's just an important point here. Man, I can't. That's like a tongue twister.
That was
important
good.
Point is that. Like most leaders are being led by someone and are leading other. There's not unless you're the president, and even him, he has a cabinet and he has the American people that control his job, So the majority of people aren't like, I don't know any leaders really, even if you're a corporate CEO, you have a board of directors, you have shareholders. Like most people are being led or under some sort of authority or leadership and leading other people at the same time. But anyways,
and they should be. Yeah. If they're not, like...
Because I think this is a common misconception women have is like, I'm not a leader because I don't have a big team or but you'd have had a big team. Like Azusa Now was a huge team. True. Like, so, I mean, like, I think though we're so careful to use the word leader because we think it means like you have to be a billionaire or a politician or like...
Or a top dog, I guess.
Or a top dog of some kind. Yeah.
Well, and I think we have to step back and define leadership. Yeah. Right? Sometimes, like, and what I found a lot of time as if, like, a female in the church world or in ministry is a lot of my leading actually is leading by influence, leading by being. Yeah. Like, more than it is leading by being, like, very high on the org chart. Yeah. And so I've realized that more and more is there's been times when like I realize like, oh, I'm leading, but I'm leading because I'm being influential. Maybe it's because I have the ear of the person who's on the top of the org chart and they're asking me my opinion about stuff. And technically that is a type of
you're
advice giving
them.
or leading.
Yeah.
Right. And realizing too that in any organization you're in, or workplace or business or family, like there's something to be said for being the leaven inside the dough, being the little thing that influences culture. Yeah. And it may feel really insignificant, but like you can take a posture of leadership. And I would say for me, that's a posture of humility. Yeah. You know what I mean? Yeah. Of like, I'm going to come into the situation curious, asking questions, being like a cheerleader of those that are around me and encouraging them. And like, in a sense, like, encouraging isn't always just you're the best. It's like
sometimes correcting.
Sometimes, right? And so like, and my type 1 self needs like
you're like, I have some corrections to hand out for here, but no, I'm just kidding.
It's more like, okay, I have a question. It's more like I have to lean into curiosity, or if you guys know much about the Enneagram, ones can be like dubbed as judgmental, but I have to, for me, I'm like, I try my best to be humble and lean into curiosity and be like, can I ask you a few questions rather than just like, here's my unsolicited advice for you. You know? Like, and so.
But I think like what you're talking about, and I want people to hear this, is it's like a gentler approach to leadership, and it is wielding influence. And I've been doing a Bible study of Queen Esther, and you really look at how she used her influence. It was very strategic. The first thing she did was pray and fast when she found out like the bad news about the Jewish people being annihilated, right?
Right.
So she hits just a small, you know, like if you think you're having a bad day at work, you know. But so then like the thing is that the queen before her had been thrown out for even approaching, you know, the king, or the king asked the queen before her, come to my party, and she's like, I'm not coming, and he's like, you're not queen anymore. Right. So he had total authority, total control, total like dominance. And if you know, like the movie The 300 was actually based on like this battle between King Xerxes, who's her husband, and Leonidas, the leader of like the Spartan army. And so so like Xerxes though, his empire was like vast. It went all the way out to India. So it was like a huge empire. So she's like having to approach this man who's her husband. She's much younger than him. And he has total authority. And if you approached a king without being invited, you could risk death just in being in the room with him. And then it's like you add to the fact that he hadn't been with her or asked to see her in 30 days. So who knows what terms she's on with him. Right. So it's like there were so many, like if you go and read the story of Esther, it's like there's so many strategic moves where how she walks out that plan. And I'll probably do a podcast on this because I think it gives so much wisdom for like how to like do what you're saying of leveraging influence, because sometimes you can't come in with a command presence. Like you can't come in like a commander to an army as a woman in certain environments. You just can't. So that's how do you use like what you're talking about, like asking the right questions, like encouraging, like cheering for people, but also then like having them in your corner enough to say, hey, I need to point out this issue, or with the leaders you're serving saying, when they ask your opinion, having something to say, having thought through, like, actually, I do have a solution for this thing you're trying to do, or like, I do think you should see it this way or this way, you know? So I think that's a really good point about like, leadership doesn't always have to be direct. It can be indirect. Yeah. And I think women in a way can leverage that indirect approach almost more powerfully than men can, because it's like we've had to
we've had to navigate.
Exactly. Right? And that leads me to my next question for you, which is, I'm curious, like, okay, so you and I have talked about our single lady life, you know?
Yeah, for sure.
And like, you're still single. I mean, you are dating and definitely want to, be getting married. But what has it been like spending most of your adult career as a single woman in the church who's in leadership positions? Because I don't think we talk about this enough.
Yeah, it's been, there have been definitely challenges, right? Like it's like,
Yeah, I think I wasn't trying to get that answer out of you, but I feel like
it's fine.
it's very honest.
It's definitely challenging because I think on one hand, and I don't know if this is personality type or if it's what it is. For me, I worked with a really, really, really phenomenal woman in ministry when I was a young adult. And she was an author. She is an author. She's amazing. But she couldn't find a place in the church. So she had to kind of forge her own path.
Yeah.
Right. So she was an author, an entrepreneur, like had her own everything because like most of the churches she was associated with would not let her preach.
From
they
the
would let her
stage.
give a talk
Yeah.
or a testimony. But her story was incredible and she was called to preach. Like she was called to teach, she was called to preach. And so she,
But a lot
I
of
realized,
she couldn't preach from the platform.
right. But she kind of she did her own thing but I realized like she had to rub shoulders and fight, like go against the grain so much. And I just had this moment as a young adult where I was like, you know what? I want to be fully myself.
Yeah.
And I want to fully embrace, like I can be kind of a tomboy, but I want to fully embrace my womanness and my feminine side.
Yeah.
And I don't want to have to rub shoulders with men and fight for my voice at a table.
Yeah.
And I think, and in some sense that was good for me internally, but I also kind of made a little bit of a vow where there's been many times where I've been in places where I'm like, I'm not going to yell right now. I'm not going to like fight. Like, and there's some team dynamics where if everyone's a bulldog, you're going to have to be a bulldog. And like, to me, I'm like, I don't want to be a bulldog to get my voice heard right now. So I look back and so sometimes I'm like, man, I have a little bit of regret. I wish I had like jumped into the ring a little bit more in some situations. But I guess to more answer your question, it's a learning curve, right?
Yeah.
Because we are in a very unique position as women in leadership, in the church in particular.
Yeah.
But as a single woman,
it's a whole
in
other
leadership, I think there have been times when I have struggled to be taken seriously.
Yeah. What do you mean by that?
Meaning like, not that people like that have been around me or I've worked with didn't love me.
Yeah.
Like they loved me. They saw who I was, but I felt like sometimes my opportunities were limited because I wasn't married. Mm-hmm. And like if somebody was married, they were more legitimate because they could do things as a couple, or the man would kind of be more the leader and the woman was there. And as a single woman, it was cool. You can do these things, or you could be our administrator, because that's the box that we know how to put single women in.
Oh my gosh, that's so true.
And I don't think it's intentional. I think it's like,
now that you said it, I'm like, oh, everybody does get put in the administrator box. I don't like that.
Right. And for me, I'm like, just because I graduated college and can govern my own life doesn't mean I need to make all of your copies.
Yeah.
And so like, I had this like thing inside of me that was like, oh, and I realized like actually the gift of administration is not viewed high enough because there are some people that are so gifted at it, and it has nothing to do with making copies.
But it doesn't mean that just because you're a single woman, you have that gift.
Exactly.
It should be shoved into that role.
For sure. Or like,
you know how long it takes me to like schedule people, someone, that's not my gift. Like,
right. And I think, so I think that's been one big challenge, is realizing like, okay, I'm a whole person, even as a single person. Like, and when I get married or when someone gets married, it's not that they're suddenly whole.
Yeah.
It's that the ideal, right, is two old people coming together.
Yeah.
But I think there are times when what I mean by being struggled to be taken seriously, it's like, okay, well, when she gets married, I know she wants to get married, she wants to have kids, like she'll kind of graduate to her actual calling, right?
Yeah.
Rather than like
you have a junior calling until.
Oh yeah, and nobody says it out loud.
No, but it's so.
But they say it in ways.
It's like
they say it in other ways. Like,
yeah. Well, and like, so how old are you now?
I'm 37.
Oh, so when did you start feeling this way? Because I think I felt it around like 25. I feel like I started to feel like the weird vibes a little bit.
Maybe, yeah. Probably mid to upper 20s. And it just kind of, and I realized like, and I've been told, I don't know if this is really true. You guys are watching a video, but I've been told I look a little younger than I am. I don't know if that's still the case. But I think for a while, it's more just like, they just assume because I'm single, I'm also still like either almost 30 or like lower 30. So it's like, I think they just kind of assume that I have less life experience or less maturity.
Yeah.
And it might be in my head.
No, it's not. It's not.
But yeah, I think I probably started feeling it mid to upper 20s. And
so how did you navigate that? Like, how have you continued to navigate that when you've been in all these leadership roles?
Yeah, I think I think just reminding myself that I've been invited to the table. Like whatever role that I've had to tell myself sometimes where it's like, and I think learning how to lead by influence has been a big way that I've navigated that.
Yeah.
Because I think sometimes when you're put in certain boxes, you feel a little trapped, right? Or it's
like this isn't me, or
this isn't me, or I have limitations in some way, or I think I was telling that story about how I wasn't the bulldog at the table because I realized I was afraid to ask, afraid to ask for more leadership, or to ask for like a different kind of role. I think because sometimes in the Christian space, it's like, well, serve where you're asked to serve.
Yeah.
Like, this is what it is. Like, God put me anywhere, which is, yes, God put me anywhere you want to put me. But I think he really loves our design. And he takes us and he puts us, like, I mean, unless he has purpose sometimes to put us somewhere where it's not, like, really in our wheelhouse or design, because he's growing something in us. But in a sense, like, I think, like, leaning into, like, oh, Lord, you lead differently than we do. And
sometimes you have to be willing to put your hand up and say, put me in.
Exactly.
Put me in, coach. And it's like, it sometimes can be a little intimidating.
Yes.
When you're not used to that, or you don't feel like you have the unspoken like leverage to do that. Like,
right. Or I feel like, if somebody wanted you to, like, let's say, like, let's go real women in ministry thing, like, let's talk about preaching, teaching, right? I think in my mind, I was like, well, if they wanted me to do that, they would ask me.
Yeah.
But like 10 other men around me would just be like, hey, I want to turn.
Yeah.
I want to do it. And they like, and I'd be like, wow, bold. Like, I couldn't ask. I know. Like, you'd have to. Anyway, does that make sense? And I feel like that's.
But now as you've gotten older, you're like, I'm more willing to say, hey, I'd love to preach, or hey, Yeah.
Or I mean, that's just one example. Like, I mean, that has nothing to do with like my role now, but more like, I think what's happened to me personally is I've gotten more comfortable in my skin and being like, all right, like I do have some operational administrative giftings and I'm more comfortable in my skin now.
Yeah.
And I'm not going to be offended if people keep giving me those roles.
Yeah.
Right? And I have, like, thankfully, like I've had a couple in the last couple years, had two boss supervisors who like had one in particular who had his daughters around my age and just really called me out and was like, hey, I'm going to meet with you like once a month and we're going to talk about any leadership thing you want to talk about.
Wow, that is so cool.
So sweet.
Just like chose to mentor you.
Yes. And like I feel like for men in the church in particular, it's like this weird taboo thing. We don't know how to raise up women. And there are more women now, but there's still not enough women to really mentor and raise up women in the way they need to. And I think I understand why it's difficult, right? Like, like it's way easier to surround yourself with young men because you're not going to be asked a bunch of questions. You're not going to have to worry about any discrepancies. You're not going to have to worry about anything like that, right? But I think like I've been so grateful for a leader who was brave enough.
A godly man who was like, I want to mentor you. Yeah. And I'm not worried about how that looks or whatever. Like,
and not everything above reproach, right?
Yeah.
Like it's not like there was not like it, but just the fact that he
was
like,
coming from a fatherly place.
Exactly.
Like, I have daughters your age. Like,
yes. Yeah. And he didn't even have to say it. I just realized, I was like, oh yeah, you have daughters my age.
Yeah.
And there must be something that reminds you of your daughters. And I've just been so grateful.
That's such an interesting thing too, like for any men who are listening to the podcast to try to figure out like, how do you share your skills in leadership? Because it's true that there has been a historical sort of normalcy of, the Christian men's breakfast at 6 a.m. where all the men get together who are business owners and chit chat about business. And like, I'm not going to throw any one organization, but all these parachurch organizations where all of the male leaders go on hiking trips or hunting trips or like these things where the top leadership do that because they're all men. And it's like, I think all those men are godly men. They love the Lord. Most of them have a really great perspective on women. But to your point, they just don't know how to take what's been sown into them and then like share it with women. They know how to do it with young men, but and there's so much of like the Billy Graham rule and all these things.
Exactly. I was going to bring that up.
Stress and all like, then on the other side, culturally, like the whole Me Too thing, I think freaked a ton of Christian men out of like, I don't want to be accused of something, right? So it's, I think though, like there has to be a marriage in the church, especially where it's like, we are like, God sees equality in all people and he like sees dignity in all people and he wants to equip. So it's like, I think there needs to be solid boundaries, but I don't think men can't mentor women. In fact,
Right.
some of the men that have most of my mentors have been men.
Yeah.
Like,
it's amazing.
because they're the ones that are in leadership, There's been a few women in leadership, but I haven't had a ton that have been in my sphere.
Right.
And they're mostly fatherly, like spiritual father type mentors, like whether I'm reading their books or know them up close or they're a pastor at a church, but I think most people do well with a mother-father dynamic, whether it's a church house or, family home or whatever. And so I think as we do need like men and women's voices, but I think my vision is to see that problem be solved of women not having other women to mentor them. Because when you get into these leadership roles, you do kind of look around and you're like, okay, I'm here.
Yep.
Thanks, Mom and Grandma, for opening the doors to get me here. But now, what do I do?
Right.
Yeah.
How do I navigate some of these really tricky waters?
Exactly that nobody has the roadmap for, or the people do have the roadmap, but they just haven't dispersed it to the rest of us.
Yeah. And I do think that the men's hunting trips are valid and great.
Yeah. And
the women's teas are great. But it's like there
should be some convergence a little bit. Yeah. So I'm curious, who are some female leaders you admire? I know you mentioned this mentor you had early in your career, but are there other female leaders that you admire?
Yeah, when you sent me that question yesterday, I was like, ooh, who? Then I had this moment where I was like, I just don't think I thought about it in a while.
Yeah.
But, there's been a couple, I wrote them down. But I think this is going to sound like a cop-out answer, but one thing that I've really admired is, I don't know, I'm sure you've noticed, we are making a podcast, right?
Yeah.
I feel like there's been this generation of creative voices, women learning how to find their voice.
Yeah.
And it's coming out in podcasts and vlogs and in blogs and in Facebook groups for moms. And it's all these women who have leadership on their lives, but maybe weren't given a space or a platform to exercise their leadership, or they don't even know that they weren't given permission to do that, and they just made something happen.
Yeah.
And I was like, man, I admire this generation of female women. Female women. Women are females. This generation of women
that could be
leaders.
A controversial topic at this point, but that's for another podcast.
That's not what this podcast is about.
Yeah.
But a generation of just women leaders who've just been like, I don't need permission. I'm just going to make the thing. And I think that's actually one thing I admire about you is you're just like, man, I'm going to forge my trail. I'm going to make it, and I'm going to make this podcast, and I'm going to do what's on my heart to do. And that's just a beautiful thing.
I hadn't thought about that, that there is a whole new generation of mom bloggers and leaders online, because, and I hadn't thought about the relationship between those typical institutions that maybe you would want to rise in leadership, and then you've met with some resistance. So it's kind of not you're going rogue, but you're kind of just let me just go into another open door.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think for some people it's been a very intentional, I'm going this way because the roadblock is over here.
Yeah.
I think for others it's just they're like, hey, I'm a mom and I'm on Facebook and I need friends.
Yeah.
And then all of a sudden they're like,
I have this huge Facebook
I have
group.
100,000 friends.
Yeah.
How did that happen?
Yeah.
And it's a very unique space and
organic.
to navigate. But there's been a couple just women in my life who have been amazing, and I think, I had a mentor in middle school and high school. Her name's Andrea Bruce. If you're listening to this, you probably aren't, but if you ever do, she influenced me so much just by being herself and by being unashamedly herself, and really walked alongside of me in a season where I just needed a big sister. And just even watching her life from afar now, we've connect every once in a while, but she's always unashamedly been herself.
I love that.
Been a leader in her sphere, in her context, kind of wherever she goes. And I've just been very impacted by that.
Her confidence. And
she is who she is, no matter where she is.
I love that too, because that it's that's somebody you had a up close and discipleship relationship with, right? This isn't somebody you follow online. Back then there was no.
Right. I have a couple other people like that on my little list, but I think when I think about who's been the most influential to me, it's It's probably
And I think that should encourage people to think about like, man, the impact you can make, even if you're a stay-at-home mom and you don't have a social media account and you're like, I just talked to this girl who's my neighbor's daughter, and you never know the impact you're having.
right. For
Or
sure.
maybe you're just a volunteer youth leader and you don't know.
Exactly.
I love that.
And it wasn't even like, we didn't meet every Tuesday at 3 p.m. It was like very
It's like
sporadic. when we
organic,
would meet.
yeah.
Yeah. And I think just having that consistent person or presence in a really specific season was so important.
I love that. So what's like one leadership rule you live by, or even what's a challenge or mindset you've had to overcome? It's something we haven't talked about yet.
Yeah, I think a recent challenge I'm still working through is how to navigate peers with prestige. I know it sounds kind of like a weird statement.
Okay, so explain what you mean.
Yeah, I have some peers right now. I've never worked in academia, and I'm a communications director for an online university.
Yeah.
And I have some peers that are brilliant.
Yeah.
They are off the charts brilliant.
Yeah.
And I think there are times when there is the humble road is the way to go, right? But it's I think I've had a lot of moments recently where I'm like, okay, how do I honor and give someone the honor and respect their due?
Yeah.
And still navigate the fact that I'm going to have to challenge some of their brilliant opinions of their brilliant mind. Because I have a lane and they have a lane.
Yeah.
And I understand my lane and they understand their lane. And we're trying to figure out how our lanes come together, and maybe sometimes they don't. It's just I think that I know this is sounding a little bit vague, but I think there is, when you begin working with high-level people that you respect.
No, I think this is a good
and especially
point.
have decades of life on you, which some of these people do. And I'm like, okay, I'm a woman, still single, in my 30s, and you are pushing 70, and you are brilliant, and you have a lot of life experience. But there's something to be said for having different perspectives.
Yeah.
Right?
Or
you
had different roles.
And different roles.
Like your
and different
expertise. Yeah.
Now, obviously, their expertise has more years behind it than my expertise. But it's just kind of navigating that.
Yeah.
It's just a little bit tricky waters to navigate.
Well, especially in our ever-changing world where I know there are super savvy 70-year-olds who are on all the tech and all the things. But there's, the stereotype, right, is the boomers and older, they don't understand maybe some of these new tech waters.
Right.
Or new ways of communicating or marketing. And it's that's not disparaging their brilliance in other arenas, but it isn't their specialty. In the same way, I am not brilliant when it comes to driving a forklift. You do not want me to go on a forklift. I know. But I'm just saying, I do not have an expertise in that. Right, yeah. So I'm not going to come into the forklift driver and be like, you know what, you are definitely pressing the wrong button here.
Right.
Or I think you should press those buttons. Right. I'm going to be like, I have no idea.
That was awesome.
If
anyone's listening and can give Sarah a free forklift lesson, that would be awesome.
I probably know someone my brother.
My brother could.
Does he have a farm or something?
No, they're movers, so they have
the forklift. Yeah. But I'm just saying, I think this is the thing, that is a good point. I think a lot of people face that, especially if you're in a job where you're working multi-generational or you're having to lead in your arena, but then somebody else wants to give feedback into your arena, or you need to give feedback into theirs, and it's how do you respect that?
Right. And I kind of go inward a little bit of okay, what's my part? What do I own? And what do I I'll take feedback. I'll take feedback. But I just having to realize, okay, Theresa, actually, this is your area of responsibility. This is your lane. And you have to have confidence that even if you're making a mistake, it's still your lane.
To make a mistake in.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, and as a one, that's probably very challenging for you because you want to do everything perfectly. And if someone could tell you the perfect plan, then what if your plan is not perfect enough?
Oh, yeah. And I think, too, it's not even it's funny because I have this weird thing where it's at first I was like, no, I'm not a perfectionist. And then I realized how many things I don't do because I'm a little bit well, that's not going to be very well. I wouldn't necessarily use the word perfect, but it's someone else could do it better.
Yeah.
Right. Or there's certain things that I haven't done because I'm oh, people are already doing that. I don't need to do that.
Yeah.
But it's, Yeah, exactly. But I'm definitely receive feedback. I'm my own worst critic, and like,
I think those are the like limiting beliefs that a lot of us have of like, I shouldn't. And I think that's something I've struggled with is there's so many women in this arena already. Why would I start a podcast? Like, or there's so many people in this type of job or at this organization or who've written a book or whatever it is. Like, why would I do that? But I do think it's one of those things we say to sort of protect ourselves from putting our little necks out there and risking, you know?
Definitely.
And it's like, because then if you can tell yourself, well, it's overcrowded, so I would just be adding more noise, you don't have to take the risk, you know?
Sure.
And I think that's something that I've really been challenged with. We're coming up on our time here, but I'm curious, like, so we've talked about a lot of things, but this is kind of a fluffy question. This is like a get to know you question.
Love the fluffy question.
If you could describe like your dream day, like no rules, no responsibilities, no limitations, what are you doing?
Oh my goodness. Gosh. The hard thing is like I have a split personality a little bit on the inside. And so part of me is like I would be backpacking in the mountains without my cell phone so that I could actually like take a break.
Yeah.
From like
fully unplug.
And then the other part of me is like, no, I'd be at like a beach resort, like, you know, like
chilling,
getting a massage, you know?
Yeah,
and so, but dream day, no rules, no responsibilities, no limitations. The truth is that day would be very spontaneous.
Yes. Like
and would not have been planned out.
Okay. This is coming from a director of operations, super planned out person, right?
Right. So if it's like I might have something I'd want to do, but
it's like your alter ego would just be like,
yeah, take the day as it comes.
I love that.
Take it as it comes.
Well, I loved our conversation. Thank you for everything you've shared. We'll probably have you back to talk about more things.
I love that.
How can people find you if they want to stay connected with you and see what you're up to?
Yeah, you can find me on Instagram.
Okay.
It's my name.
Okay.
At Theresa_Babbitt.
Okay.
2 B's, 2 T's.
Like rabbit.
Yep. And I just made my account private, so you'll have to request to follow me. Sorry. But, or maybe I'll make it public again. I don't know. I went through a moment where I was like, I think I need some space.
These weirdos on the internet. No, I've almost always had a private account, and it's been very hard thinking about having a public account because I'm like so like, I don't want anybody like bothering me, and I don't want all these bots and like, you know.
Well, what's weird is I feel like since I made my account private, I've gotten more weird random follow requests than I ever did before. And I think it's because someone can't see your profile. So like, well, I have to try to follow you. So you find out how many people have been viewing your profile that are kind of
like randoms.
Random, where you're just like, it is so interesting. Anyway, that could be a whole other podcast too. Cybersecurity. Yeah.
But our audience is likely women who just want to see what you're up to. Yeah. And
go ahead.
Okay.
Shoot me a follow request.
Okay. Awesome. Well, thank you so much for your time. I really appreciate you doing this with me. It was a lot of fun.
So fun.
And we're going to have to do it again soon.
Yes. Thank you, Sarah. So grateful for your time and for being here. It's been an honor.
Thanks, friend.